Well, hi, I am Beth Monahan. I am the CEO and founder of Inkhouse. And today I'm joined by Tina Cassidy, who used to work at Inkhouse as our Chief Content Officer and is now the Chief Marketing Officer at WGBH. Tina, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to talk to you about this.
Well, I like to talk to you about everything, but
Same.
today I asked Tina if she would talk to me about what public media's role looks like as we enter the Biden administration, as we are hopefully exiting this phase of fake news accusations, and the media is really working to restore the public's trust in facts and information that they receive through the press. So I guess my first question for you, Tina, is, what was the impact of the war on facts and fake news on public media audiences?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Beth. It might be helpful if I just gave a quick overview of what GBH is, because I think it
Yes.
will inform this conversation. So we are based in Boston, but we're the largest content creator for PBS. That means that we create many of the national icon series, Nova, Frontline, Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, American Experience, as well as kids shows like Arthur and Molly of Denali. We're also the home of PBS Learning Media. That is curricula used by millions of teachers and students nationwide. And we are affiliated with PRX, which is the third largest podcast distributor in the US. In addition to all of that, we also have a local NPR station, 89.7, and classical radio station as well. So we do a lot of things. We have a large footprint, not just locally, but nationally as well. So to your question about what the impact has been in terms of fake news and the war on facts, the impact was not particular to public media. I feel like we've all suffered, right? Those of us who work in the media have suffered. Those who are informed by the media have suffered. Our democracy have suffered. Individual lives have suffered. Even some have died. So, public media does have a special place in the American landscape. PBS, sort of starting there, they've been around for 50 years. Many of us grew up on Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street, Arthur. These were sort of groundbreaking programs that instilled in all of us the sense of shared values around kindness and inclusivity, right? And those kids have grown up. Hopefully many of us now depend on fact-based programming such as PBS NewsHour. I definitely have to give a plug for Judy Woodruff, who's a national institution unto herself, but also Frontline, the investigative series that we produce, Nova, the leading science series that we produce, American Experience, another one of our programs that provides history documentaries, right? So by sort of creating these the shared baseline of knowledge and fact-based information, that's really essential. We've really, as a country, that has fractured in so many ways. Because we operate a local NPR station as well, that mix of national reporting combined with local coverage has found a hungry audience. I think in part because it's calm, straightforward, honest, transparent. Overall, I think that shared set of facts to work from is essential for us to function as a society. Just a couple quick points to add. For the 18th year in a row, Americans have named PBS the most trusted institution in a nationwide survey. And that's of all of the institutions in America, right? So that's a pretty high honor.
Like including businesses and...
Yeah, government institutions. Yeah. I think that's really important. We also outscore other media outlets as well. And 72% of those surveyed trust PBS News and public affairs programming a great deal. And we're often ranked number one in terms of the trust value. So that's something that we hold dear.
No, it's so important. Did you find, Tina, during the period, especially over the last year, did you find your audience expanding as more people were looking for sources of facts and real information?
Yes, definitely. I mean, our people consuming news on our website was up 82% in 2020 versus 2019.
Wow.
And the number of those users coming from search was up 100 and almost 80% year over year. If you look at the top 20 NPR stations in America, we've all had our listenership grow in the last 5 years, which is how the sort of time period that I would define as like when the war on facts has been waged. So, that applies to us as well. Our membership is growing too. So I think we have lots of really strong markers of how audiences are coming to rely more and more on public media.
That's great. So it's interesting that more are finding you through search, because I was curious about the impact of all of these fake news sites, and we have all these fake news pages on social media. It sounds like that didn't affect people's ability to find real news, but did you have a problem combating some of those sites in terms of search terms on for SEO?
I can't say that it has impacted our search engine optimization at all. We've been working on search engine optimization generally, and our numbers just keep going up and up. If you look at the last year of what the top search terms were, I mean, COVID would certainly be one of them. That's no surprise. In a place, if we just talk about our local news audience for a moment and thinking about, the role that Massachusetts has played in vaccine development, right, and how our state has handled COVID, and also being one of the early states on the, during the first wave to have a spike in contagions. I mean, there's been a lot of news happening here, right? We also had presidential candidates, so yeah, newsarama. And, I mean, I think it's great that people know where to find trusted sources, and yet so many people don't. And that's the work that, I care so passionately about. I know you do as well. How do we make sure that people know how to sort fact from fiction? I do think that some of the fallout from the last election is splintering our media consumption patterns even more. I mean, watching sort of Fox News break apart and fracture off audience to other more extreme outlets, for example, is really interesting and also frightening. But as long as I see the numbers for public media continue to go up, I feel like we're doing the right thing.
No, absolutely. I mean, now that the election is over, I'm curious to see what will happen with audiences. Are people going to keep consuming as much news as they were before? And how have you seen the media adjusting to this new normal? Because there's less to criticize theoretically, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the news, since the election, the news hasn't abated, right? There was an insurrection on the Capitol, then inauguration, now a second impeachment. We've also got a vaccine rollout happening all at the same time. So the news won't stop coming. Honestly, I think that the pandemic has impacted how audiences engage with the news more than anything else. With most of us stuck at home, TV's been a really durable medium, and web and streaming are through the roof. So for us, we're still committed to producing news that's accurate, accountable, and ethically produced. Transparency is really important on all of our stories. You'll find not only the name of the reporter, but the editor who helped to bring it to life. And
that's unique, Tina. I haven't seen other outlets do that.
Yeah, well, it actually goes back to early last year, early 2020. Frontline was the first U.S. public media organization to join the Trust Project, which is a global consortium of news organizations that implement standards around transparency and help audiences evaluate quality, integrity, and reliability for journalism. They did this to obviously help slow the spread of false and misleading news and to amplify reputable journalism. So, Frontline being such a respected investigative journalism series, we've all sort of been watching and learning about how they bring more transparency to their work. So if you go to their website, you'll be able to see full interviews with everyone.
We'll put a link in the blog post for that.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's great. Are there other things that GBH is doing to instill trust in the audience, in its audiences, and in news in general?
Yeah, well, I think it's also about what we are choosing to cover at this time. You know, we have doubled down on our reporting about hate speech, disinformation, and media manipulation on social media and other digital platforms. We've also curated a resource page to combat disinformation and to encourage media literacy as well. And we can share that link with you too.
Great.
You know, part of the other thing that we do is really engage in our local community. So last spring, we were able to convene teens and sit with them, introduce them to a new civics curriculum to help them learn how to be better news consumers. This is something that we did in partnership with the Boston Public Library and the Boston Public Schools. And, you know, that sort of mission-based work that we do never ends.
It's so important. I mean, the kids are growing up in such a weird environment that we have to teach them how to separate fact from craziness.
We really do. Yeah.
Well, thanks for telling me about that, Tina. I wanted to also ask you a little bit about, so what some of you watching may not know is that in addition to Tina's day job, she is also an author of 3 books, probably many more in the future. And she's a former journalist herself. And so one of the things that I have been thinking about a lot as we look at this issue of trust in the media is, how the media fact checks articles. How do they fact check information that gets to us? And maybe you could just tell me a little bit about what that process was like when you were a journalist.
Sure. Well, a traditional newsroom would be organized where a reporter submits a story, files a story, and then it goes to an editor, and then it goes to a copy editor. So you have at least 2 layers of editing on any given story, which is great because, you know, you make a typo, you might have misspelled somebody's name or perhaps something worse, and hopefully all of those things get caught in the process of editing. Fact checking could happen at either of those layers of editing, but almost always happened at the level of the copy desk. The primary editor would sort of just make sure that there was clarity to the story and that, you know, you had sourced it properly, and that, the whole thing hung together well. So there wasn't a particular job that said, you know, like this is the fact checker, right? But that's for like a daily news organization. Long lead magazines like the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Boston Magazine, and others would have fact checkers. And having gone through that process, it's much more tedious because there's a lot more time to check the facts. So they would literally go through every single sentence, and if there's a fact in there, they would check it. So they could either check it on their own, or they would, check it with you, or both. And so you would get your submission back, marked up in red or just with lots of questions and so forth. I've also had this done with every nonfiction book I've ever written. So, which is like, a months-long process to get fact checked and to have to respond to those. So it's quite tedious, but quite important. And I think that is the key differentiator between, real news and people who might have a podcast and are
right,
just
because we
like
have so many
as they go.
No,
right?
we have so many influencers,
right.
Who have millions of followers on Instagram, or maybe they're going to have millions of followers on the Clubhouse now. I don't know, but whatever is next,
Right.
And I think that is where people really have a hard time distinguishing between what is news and what is information.
Right.
Like, what is somebody's point of view, and where did that person who decided to say this fact get it from? And I think most the average audience member doesn't know what that process looks like.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why it's important to know, if you get your information from a trusted news source, you can pretty much ensure that there has been some level of editing and fact checking. Of course, it doesn't always catch all mistakes, but at least you're held accountable for those mistakes as well and forced to correct them.
No, that's great. Well, thank you, Tina. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think is important as we explore this topic?
I think it's a great topic. And I think that, from the perspective of your clients, making sure that they are aligning their brand with trusted news sources is key. I know that influencers can be a really popular way to help, promote ideas or a brand or content. But you have to make sure that even they are, at a level that you're going to be comfortable with, and that won't be embarrassing you in the long run. So,
yeah, absolutely. We've seen a few of those go
yeah,
bad lately.
Yes.
Well, Tina, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time today. I'm so grateful. You're always so wise.
Well, I enjoyed it. It's so nice to talk to you, Beth.